One of the changes, well, actually, let me start. This is your first budget that's actually yours, right, for MCPS?
Yes.
Okay, so how did that process go for you?
It was a good process. It involved lots and lots of different individuals coming together to all work on it and offer their thoughts, and working closely with the Board of Education members and the staff in the community. And there's still a ways to go on this process, so it's by no means finished, but this is the kind of launch of the process that will happen between now and June.
From listening to your comments, I get the sense that you're concerned this is a potentially very unstable environment between federal funding, state funding. How does that sort of influence your process in putting this together?
I think we have to have a laser-like focus on student learning, and we have to really look at what works and where we get student results. And by results, I mean actual learning. Students can read, they can write, they can do math. And then I also think we have to think about what's efficient versus what's effective all the time, because we need both.
So you said focus on reading, math, learning, I think. So what's the reason for eliminating some literacy assistance personnel? I can't remember the word title.
We have some literacy coaches that those jobs were eliminated, and those jobs will be realigned in other areas. And we really looked at positions that we thought that we could provide that service without that position. And we looked at any position that wasn't teacher of record, a bus driver of record, the people who actually touch the students every day. And that's very difficult in a very large, complex organization, but this was an effort to think about that. We need all the positions we have. And so when we're forced to think about how do we change what we're doing, we have to think about what do those roles do, what do those individuals do, and how do we make sure that still gets done. And we'll spend the next 6 months talking and working and thinking on that as we move toward July 1.
So are you saying that literacy coaches were directly, those positions were realigned to the support positions, or were you just giving an example?
I was just giving an example.
Okay.
Actually, let other people, let's see if anyone else has questions so we can get some other folks. Okay.
So, I just forgot my question. But becoming more efficient in your office of Chief Financial Officer, I understand your new CFO doesn't have a background in finance. How are you going to increase efficiency?
Ms. Diamond has a background in budgeting, and she's done a lot of budgeting. We'll hire a director of finance who will work directly with her and oversee the finance office. So it's just instead of having a chief financial officer and a chief budget officer, we'll have a chief finance and budget officer and then a director of finance who will oversee all of the systems around finance.
So that's a new position?
Well, no, we had a retirement, so there's no new position.
No, the finance office.
That's where the retirement was. So it's just a change in duties. We had 2 individuals, we'll still have 2 individuals.
On the opposite side of efficiencies, what are some of the main priorities of this budget that you wanted to make sure not only got maintained, but maybe even got strengthened further?
I think we absolutely have to focus on learning and results and accountability. Learning says, I know that the student is making progress as a reader, as a writer, as a mathematician, and all the other disciplines that we do. Results means that I know that because I can look at the student's classwork, I can look at the projects, I can look at assessment scores, and all those multiple measures. And then accountability says that I'm accountable to know that for all the 3rd graders in this 3rd grade in this school, all the students in this elementary school, all the students in all elementary schools. So we build from the individual to the collective to the system. And so we really want to pay attention to learning results and then being accountable for the learning of every child.
What's your message to teachers who are going to have to enter the Scantrons and the grades for this information that will become available for the students?
I don't think that's an accurate portrayal of teachers having to enter Scantrons and grades. It's really not. So as we think about it, what we want to do as part of this budget is to put information at teachers' fingertips so they touch paper less and are involved in that activity less, not more. And so, as I said, over the next 6 months, we'll continue to work toward that.
I understand. I've heard from some teachers, just maybe not all across the system, but that's how they enter the grades for the system-wide assessments. So
Yep.
maybe that's just
I understand, but as we make these changes, they're all interconnected. And so when we look at, if I have two pieces of a 1,000-piece puzzle, then when I see those two pieces of the puzzle, that's what I think it is. When I see how they fit into the overall system, I suddenly see how it all fits together. And so today was the first presentation of the overall budget. So there'll be a lot of explanation, discussion, debate, questions with the Board of Education as they have that budget with the community and staff and everyone interacting around the budget. Then it'll go to the county government where there'll continue to be conversation and then finally be adopted in June. So what it looks like last month or today is not necessarily what it will look like in March or June.
If you were to make a case,
Go ahead, Ben.
if you were to make a case to the state, I'm sure you're aware they're facing, or will be facing, nearly $500 million budget deficit as the governor puts together his new proposal. Obviously, Montgomery County is in a unique place in terms of other school systems in the state and how fast it's growing. So what would your case to the state be?
I would say that we have currently about 15% of the pre-K grade 12 students in the state. In this 1/24th of the school systems, we have 15% of the students in our school system. And as Montgomery County goes, so will go this state. So we do not need him to overly advantage us, but he certainly needs to understand that our system is very large, very complex, and does a lot for the economy and produces a lot for the state of Maryland beyond the borders of Montgomery County.
What kind of student growth are you looking at?
We had 2,800 new students this year. We're expecting over 3,000 next year, and we're expecting almost 10,000 in the next 5 years.
And that's far and away some of the biggest numbers in the state.
Absolutely. 10,000 would be, over the next 5 years, would be larger than several of the school systems in the state that we'll get as new students.
Can you talk a little bit about your strategic accelerators? What are some of those?
Sure, we're working around, as I said earlier, a what and four hows. And the what is improving teaching and learning anywhere we need to and maintaining the high level of teaching and learning where it's being highly effective for many, many students. We're also going to look, as I just said, at learning results and accountability. We have several ideas, including technology tools at the teacher's fingertips, which will ask them to look at fewer pieces of paper, not more, in many areas. We want to look at human capital. When you're hiring, the number of people that we hired this year, the number we'll hire next year, and as we have student growth, hire ever more people. We need a diverse, highly effective, highly committed workforce when they come to us, and then as we help them grow and develop as professionals over the years that they work with us. So we'll really pay attention to human capital, human need. We'll also pay attention to partnerships. One of the wonderful things about this community is there are literally hundreds of different partners that we engage with. This building engages with over 200, and then we have 204 schools that have individual partnerships. We need to constantly be looking at coherence and alignment and return on investment if we're committing system funds as part of that partnership. And then we also need to look at operational excellence. We've got to look at our budgeting system, our finance system, and our HR system, and make sure that they are up to date and that we don't have any failures in those systems as we go forward.
Are you saying you think that there are some areas that are deficient at this point?
No, I'm just saying the software is old, and you want to constantly be looking at upgrading the software.
If I could ask Mr. Durso on opening the Pandora's box of school calendars, how satisfied are you with how this has turned out?
Well, I'm not sure my satisfaction is important. I think we've been very clear with the information we've received from the governor's office in terms of how we're going to go forward, and I think the calendar that we just approved takes that into account, and we'll see how it plays out. But I think, as you heard earlier, especially from one of our board members, the weather, snow is kind of the wild card in this right now, and we don't know what we'll have. But I think we have a calendar that will be adequate, and the unforeseen circumstances remain unforeseen.
Mr. Durso, back to the budget, I know you just saw it, but what's your first takes on the budget?
Well, I think what you've heard from Dr. Smith is certainly more than appropriate. And although this is kind of the first public unveiling, if that's the right term we want, there's a lot of work that went on behind the scenes, a lot of discussions, numerous meetings, numerous stakeholders had input on this. So I think that as kind of the first step, I think we're pleased, but there's still some unknowns out there as we go ahead. Every budget season is unique in its own right, and I can't imagine that this one will not be the same.
Yeah, I know part of the influx in terms of immigrant children that have come in was definitely a concern, especially it's been monitored since 2012. How does it play into, I know we see a huge disparity. We see 30% of Hispanic population, but we see a very low graduation rate. How is the immigrant children reflected in this budget?
Good.
That's certainly an area of concern for us because every child who walks in the door of a Montgomery County Public School is one of our students, period. That's the end of that conversation. Once they walk in the door, we need to see, if we're talking about English learners, we need to see learning another language as an asset. If you bring another language with you and you need to acquire English, that's an asset for you. It's our job to help you acquire English. And we have different efforts like dual language schools in this effort. We're looking at how we're going to move that from elementary to secondary. We currently have a CREA program, which looks at recent arriving English learners. We're going to expand that program next year so that a student who arrives here late and really can't enter into and get the full participation in high school and all of the credits that are required doesn't arrive here at 17 and go into 9th grade English, 9th grade history. They acquire the language, they acquire job skills, and they move toward a Maryland State diploma either through the external diploma process or the GED, and they get some career training. We also have 30 more English learner teachers in next year's budget. We've added a number of parent community coordinators, and we'll continue to look at strengthening that. So the goal is, no matter what the student brings to school, that we see the asset in that and the benefit in that, and then we build on that with the learning that student needs.
Following up on students with increased needs as the demographics of MCPS changes, I noticed that special education has almost or more than twice as much funding for enhancements than ESOL does. Is that reflecting a change in perspective, or what was your reasoning for that?
Yeah, that would just be in those strategic accelerators that I talked about. When you actually look at the budget, it's $10 million of those, but that's a cumulative effect with the $37 million we're spending this year in those same areas and the total budget which supports that. So I don't think we can say at this point that this group of students or that group of students is getting this much more, this much less. What we're saying is we're looking at what each student needs as they enter our schools and our classrooms, and how do we support them. So when you look at that $10.2 million, also look at the $37 million, also look at the $2.45 billion, and how it's used all the way, the thread line all the way through that, and that'll give you a really clear picture of all the different things we're doing on behalf of any student, no matter what he or she needs as they walk into the school door.
After going through your first budget proposal process in Montgomery County, is there anything that surprised you, something you weren't expecting in this process?
I don't know if it was a surprise or not. I think it's consistent with the community I've found here in the last 6 months since I moved to Gaithersburg in June. And that is a very collaborative, very student-centered approach. And while lots of people have different interests and there's lots of effort about different specifics in a budget process, overall, everyone seems committed to whether or not children benefit, grow, develop, and learn the way they need to. And that's a very pleasant feeling to be standing here knowing and having experience for the last 6 months.
A couple of board members noted that you moved chairs for your budget presentation. Did you have a symbolic meaning behind that?
Yes, in a sense, and that is that when I sit there, I can't really see all the board members. And when I'm recommending a budget, I'm doing as an employee of the Board of Education. I'm never confused that ultimately the Board of Education members, every time they make a decision out there around policy or calendar or anything else, they have to raise their hand in public and vote. And it's a very tough job. And so I wanted to make it very clear that I was able to speak to all of them at that table, and that while I am a part of that group, ultimately I'm not a member of the Board of Education. I'm the superintendent that's been hired to administer the school system. And so I did it both as a way of communicating and as a sign of respect to the Board of Education.
Dr. Smith, you just mentioned that you recently moved to Gaithersburg. We never heard a comment from you with regard to two high schools, Watkins Mill and Gaithersburg High School, protesting after you deliberately said you expect them to remain in class. What are your thoughts on their behavior or the fact that they did that?
Well, I'm not aware of those specific incidents of what happened. I was aware at the time because I was notified each day as to what was going on in schools, and those are issues that principals work with. I've been a high school principal for years and years, worked with a lot of students, and our principals are very skillful, and they work with the families and make the decisions. I would, however, call on our students once again, don't think that a spontaneous protest at this point is making any difference. Find more productive, proactive ways to make your feelings, your support, your angst, your opposition to something. And I'll be delivering that message again to the community. And then I'll trust our 25 high school principals, our 39 middle school principals, and our 133 elementary principals to work with the students and families for whom they are responsible every day.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.